Okay, so again, here's our equation that we derived by looking at things at the microscale level, right? These are all parameters that have to do with the underlying energy carriers, and then this is Fourier's law, right? This is basically ignoring those details and just looking at it at the continuum level. So the first difference between these two equations is that this is a net rate of heat transfer. This is in watts, joules per second. This is not in watts, right? This is heat transfer per unit area. That's what the little double prime it means. So it's watts per unit area. So the first thing I'm going to do then is divide this equation through by the area to get the heat flux. So that's pretty easy. So now I have the heat flux and again the heat flux. The next thing I'm going to do is start to look at this temperature difference, right? So you can see that Fourier's law is written in terms of a derivative of temperature, and this is written in terms of an actual temperature difference, right? So how do I go from this temperature difference to a derivative in temperature? And to do this, you have to remember just a little bit of calculus, which is basically how is a derivative defined, right? A derivative is actually defined as a temperature difference, but in the limit at which the distance between the two temperatures goes to zero, right? So if I think about what calculus says, let me see if I can find my pointer here. Forget it. Calculus says that the temperature derivative is the limit of the temperature at some position right ahead of x by dx, some position behind x by dx, right? The difference between those two temperatures divided by 2 times dx in the limit as dx goes to 0, right? So if I go back up here and look at this is kind of looking like a derivative, right? The only way it's going to become a derivative is if this distance, this LMS here, plays the role of dx, right? If this distance between molecular collisions gets really, really small, then it's going to be possible to write this term as a derivative and recover Fourier's law, right? So if I do that, then if I want to make this term look like this term, what do I have to do? The first thing I got to do is multiply and divide by 2 times LMS. So that's what I did here, right? I put a 2 LMS on the top, I put a 2 LMS on the bottom. So now this guy here looks exactly like this guy here if LMS is playing the role of dx. So if the distance between molecular energy carrier collisions becomes very, very small, then this term that I have right here is exactly equal to dt dx, right? And that's a fundamental assumption that goes into Fourier's law. In order for me to recover Fourier's law, one thing that has to be true is that these energy carriers can't move very far, right? Their collision distance has to be very, very small. But if that's true, then I can substitute this guy into here, and this equation becomes what I've put down here, right? So now this guy here is starting to look a lot like Fourier's law, right? It's got the same form. It's a heat flux. It's related to the temperature gradient, just like this one is. So what is this telling me? This is telling me that, if Fourier's law holds, then this constant here, this property K, thermal conductivity, what is it really? Well, it must be related to these characteristics of these underlying energy carriers, right? K must be the product of how far can these energy carriers go, how many do we have per unit volume, how fast are they going, right? And then how much energy do they carry? This is what K is, right? So when you get this quantity, thermal conductivity, and you look it up, what you need to understand is that fundamentally it's really based on the characteristics of the underlying energy carriers, right? I mean, a lot of times we'll just measure K, but if you're a physicist or a material scientist, you might actually try to look at the underlying structure of the matter that makes up the material, and based on what the energy carriers are, predict what K is, or even try to design a material that has either a high K or a low K by manipulating some of these different parameters, because that's what K is, right? K is telling me something about how good a material is at transporting energy. So if we start to look at the thermal conductivity of different materials, and here all I've done is using ease plotted thermal conductivity as a function of temperature for a bunch of different materials. One thing that should jump out at you is that this scale is logarithmic, and it covers what, like 6 orders of magnitude. So different materials can have extremely different thermal conductivities, right? It's not like all materials kind of have the same conductivity. No. Depending on what the energy carriers are, you can be very good at transporting energy conductively or very bad, right? What kind of materials are very good at transporting energy? Well, if I look towards the top of this graph, I see things like high purity metals, right? High purity copper, high purity aluminum. These are apparently materials that are really good at transporting energy through conduction. So what does that mean in terms of their energy carriers? Well, let's see. If I'm transporting energy through a high purity metal, the primary energy carrier is going to be an electron, right? And those electrons, they're really good. If you look over here, there's a lot of them. They move super fast, right? And they can move pretty far before colliding with one another or colliding with the structure, right? So they do pretty well along every one of these parameters, and that's why they have such good high thermal conductivity. You know, if you start moving down a little bit, you start to see that going from pure metals to alloys, you suffer a little bit in terms of conductivity. So why is that? Well, because the alloys have these impurities, and these impurities impede the motion, so this distance that the electrons can travel gets cut down quite a bit, right? And that's what's going on there. If you go down even farther, you get down here to non-conducting solids like Teflon. So there you don't have any electrons. You're relying on other energy carriers in the material, like just lattice vibrations to transfer the energy. If you go down even lower than that, you would have liquids and then gases, right? So gases are really kind of bad because there's not a whole lot of energy carriers, right? And the mean free path isn't super long. So, you sort of suffer as you move from, high purity metals down to alloys, down to non-conductors and liquids and gases. And if you go over here and look at this equation we just derived, you can see exactly why that might be the case, right? You can translate that knowledge of what K really means into why different materials behave the way they do. The other thing I'd like to point out is we learned something else here, which is that Fourier's law doesn't actually always hold, right? When would it not hold? Well, it wouldn't hold when I'm not able to go from that temperature difference to a derivative of temperature, right? And that's the case when this distance between energy carrier collisions becomes large. And one thing you'll learn in this class and just in life in general is that nothing is ever large or small by itself, right? Things are only ever large or small compared to something else, and there's no different here, right? So how large is large, how small is small? Well, it depends on what kind of problem you're looking at, right? So the correct way to think about whether or not the distance between energy carrier collisions is large or small is to compare that distance with some kind of a characteristic length that's associated with the scale of your problem, right? And that ratio, LMS over L characteristic, is called the Knudsen number. It's a dimensionless number that you would calculate basically to decide whether or not you can use continuum concepts like Fourier's law for a problem that you're looking at, right? So the Knudsen number, if it's much less than 1, then hey, Fourier's law is going to work great. 99.9% of every problem you face is going to be that kind of a situation, right? But if the Knudsen number starts to approach 1 or get bigger than 1, then you should know that, as it approaches 1, Fourier's law is not such a good model anymore. If it gets much bigger than 1, you can throw Fourier's law out the window. It's not going to help you at all, right? So this is kind of how you make those kind of judgments. In terms of when this might actually happen, right? When might you not be able to use Fourier's law because the Knudsen number isn't much less than 1? So there's a couple of situations where I've experienced this. One is we used to do some work in microscale heat transfer problems. So microscale heat transfer problems being problems where the scale of the problem that you were looking at gets very, very small, on the order of tens of nanometers, right? And if that's the case, then you might get to the point then where your characteristic length is so small that the Knudsen number actually starts to approach 1. And the other case where you might run into a Knudsen number that isn't much less than 1 is if you're working in some kind of a vacuum system or a rarefied gas system, where now you have so few molecules of gas that the gas molecules can actually travel a long way before they hit another gas molecule or a wall. In that case, this LMS is getting very large, right? And in that case, again, the Knudsen number could break down, or not break down, but the Knudsen number is going to approach 1, and you're going to decide that Fourier's law might break down. Okay, so that's a lot about something that's pretty simple actually, which is Fourier's law. And we will in this class use Fourier's law basically all the time, right? You need a different class to really understand what to do if Fourier's law stopped working. But what I hope you get out of this sort of video or lecture is two things. One is, this thermal conductivity means something. It's related to the underlying energy carriers. And two is, be aware that Fourier's law is an approximation. And it's an approximation that's usually pretty good, but this is how you would know if it might not be good anymore.